Welcome to the Bates Dance Festival at home. I am so glad that you could join us tonight for this virtual event. My name is Shoshona Currier. I am the director of the Bates Dance Festival.
And I'm Allie James. I am the director of training programs. Today we're joining you from Lewiston, Maine, on the traditional land of the Wabanaki people.
And we are so happy to be in virtual space with you.
And in real space with our students, artists, faculty, staff, interns, and our community.
And with each other. This summer, all of the performances that we're presenting were curated with safety in mind. Work will be presented outdoors, on film, and online. We adapted to protocols, and this performance series is engaging, innovative, and one of a kind. And safe.
This summer, we're thrilled to be joined by a small cohort on campus for our professional training program, and very much looking forward to a full return of all of our programs in 2022.
Our box office is downtown this year at LA Arts at 221 Lisbon Street. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Betsy. And our performances are all over town, thanks to our amazing production team, Justin and Chelsea. Hi.
Of course, we couldn't do this without everybody behind the scenes. To our advisory board, the Bates College support staff, our tech team, our videographers, our interns, and our staff that works year-round, we thank you so very much.
Thank you so much to our funders, National Endowment for the Arts, New England Foundation for the Arts, the Maine Arts Commission, the Onion Foundation, the Morton Kelly Charitable Trust, National Performance Network, Platts Associates, Shapiro Family Foundation, and Androscoggin Savings Bank. And thank you to our individual donors. You mean the world to us. A full list of those donors can be found on our website at batesdancefestival.org. We couldn't do this without your support.
We're so grateful that you all have joined us tonight. Please enjoy the event.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Artist Talk. Yay! We're live in Lewiston, Maine, where we're in the third and sadly final week of the PTP program. We have our awesome students and faculty and staff in-house, as well as the wonderful RDDI cohort. Woo! And then we also have folks joining us on their computers at home. However, you're joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We're glad you're here. My name's Marin. I'm a staff member here at BDF. I forgot to say my name last time I introduced one of these. Tonight, we are really fortunate to get to listen to Ishmael Houston-Jones and Miguel Gutierrez share. They're here teaching in PTP their workshop Into the Weirdness, which I've been really lucky to be in, and I have wanted to write down every word that comes out of their mouths. So I'm really excited to hear more. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Marin. Thank you all for being here. This is my first time at the Bates Dance Festival, and I'm having a great time teaching with Miguel Gutierrez. I'm not going to talk a whole lot. I brought 3 short video clips which span the time from 1983 to the project I'm currently working on, just to give a sample of like how my work may have evolved or not, and also themes that have recurred in the work. A lot of my work, almost all of my choreography is improvised. That is, the choreography is almost never set. It's always reliant on myself when I'm doing it, or other dancers, following more or less tight scores. Sometimes the scores are very loose, sometimes the scores are very definite, but the dancing itself is never set. Almost, I'd say 95% of the time it's never set. The reason I sort of got into improvisation is that I really loved dancing, and I was really lousy at learning other people's choreography. I was always the person in the back of the studio trying to learn as all the other people were going across the floor. I was the one left on the other side trying to pick up the work. So I decided that, oh, I like to dance, I can't learn, or it's difficult for me to learn, so I'm gonna become an improviser. That's the honest truth in all transparency. But I've sort of developed different techniques of improvisation and really mined over the years of how improvisation can be not codified so much as really part of the artwork, part of like the technique of improvisation. So I'm going to show, the first thing I'm going to show is an untitled duet from 1983. It's a section of it. It was a untitled duet by Fred Holland, who passed away 3 years ago, and myself at Contact at 10th and 2nd. It was the 11th anniversary of Steve Paxton codifying and naming contact improvisation as an open source form. Fred and I, being downtown punks, decided to do a duet, doing a contact improvisation duet in which we did everything wrong. So the first, and this was never written down and never given to the audience, but we did have a little manifesto. The first wrong thing we did was that we were Black. Because contact improvisation at the time, as opposed to now, is a very sort of liberal arts school form, practiced largely by white people. And Fred and I at that time in 1983 were really feeling ourselves sort of separated from the downtown dance scene. There are other things that are more obvious. I don't, if that isn't more obvious, is that we would wear street clothes instead of sweats. We wore heavy boots instead of being barefoot. We played a really loud, obnoxious sound score, which is by a composer who I met on the street, gave me a cassette. It was sounds from a Kung Fu movie, looped. Mark Allen Larson was his name. We would have non-performative conversations, chatting with each other. We would fuck with flow, which means that we would like interrupt ourselves, interrupt each other. And finally, we would stay out of physical contact as much as possible. So let's take a look at that. Like this. So yeah, it's weird looking at that now. So the second thing I want to show you was originally made in the 1980s as well, but I'm going to show you, it's a piece called Them, which is a collaboration with the novelist, poet Dennis Cooper and composer, guitarist Chris Cochran. The piece was made in 1986, premiered in 1986. I got the most negative review I ever got in my life for this piece. People walked out on it. The piece was for 6 male-identified dancers, but it being made in 1986, it was made in the height of the AIDS epidemic, or AIDS hysteria. And people were the negative review I got was in the gay press, actually. The piece dealt with gay male sexuality, gay male violence, violence against gays. When it was revived in 2010, which is the version I'm going to show an excerpt from today, people were throwing roses and there was enough distance from the height of the epidemic, I think, that people could look at it more objectively. But yeah, people hated this piece.
I met Kevin Creedon, 19, in a hustler bar on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. He went back in a cab with me to my hotel. He closed the curtains and sat down on the bed. I said, "What do you like to do?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. I like to fuck about once a year." I said, "Well, let's play it by ear." He lay back on the bed and laughed. I met Frederick Blaine, 21, through an ad in the Advocate newspaper. He came to my house in Monrovia one evening and we watched television. He said he had to be back at his parents' house by 11 p.m. It was 9:15. I said, "I guess we should get busy then." He said, "I've never had sex before, I'm afraid." I said, "Don't worry about it." He put his arms around my waist and lay his head on my shoulder like we were slow dancing. I met Joe Hardy, 15, in a glitter rock club on the Sunset Strip in 1974. We talked about music, first there, then in his bedroom. We knelt on the floor smoking grass and looking through pictures of him as a child. "You were always a knockout," I said. He looked surprised. "Are you gay?" he said. I nodded. "What a coincidence," he said. After a few moments of grinning at one another, I leaned over and kissed him. "Take that," I said. I met John, on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood when a friend and I decided to split the cost of a hustler. We drove him back to my friend's apartment on the Sunset Strip. We smoked 2 joints, and it being winter first.
Niall Jones, Felix Cruz, Joey Canizaro, Jacob Slomensky, Enrico D. Way, who was doing a solo I did in the 80s, was a solo dance there, and Jeremy Pfeiffer was the man with the stick. So, again, that was all the movement that the dancers were doing was improvised, based on a very sort of tight score, sort of based on the music and Dennis's writing. The last thing to show you is the project I'm currently working on. It's just sort of the last 5 minutes. Danspace Project commissioned me to make for their most recent platform, a video piece. And the piece that I'm working on now, it's called Try, T-R-Y. We got this San Francisco artists, Keith Hennessy, Snowflake Calvert, Jose Abad, Kevin O'Connor, and the composer is Gabriel Nunez de Arco. Then COVID happened, and suddenly I couldn't rehearse. So the first 4 months were rehearsed over Zoom. And then after vaccination, I got to go out there for 2 weeks, and then we went back to Zoom. And then now, the last 3 weeks, last week was prior to coming here. We were on Fire Island in a residency by Bafo Foundation. So they all flew east, and we worked for 3 more weeks. But the piece will premiere in November. So this is just sort of a representation. This video, I was in St. Mark's Church, where Danspace Project is housed in New York. They were all at Counterpulse in San Francisco. And it's sort of like, this is sort of the end of a 20-minute video, the very last bit of it. It sort of illustrates how we were working over Zoom for months, making a work. So let's look at this.
Everything and nothing at all.
Paying attention to the play of light and shadow on the backs of your eyelids. The psychedelic paisleys, starburst, the red and the black. Seeing the light and shadow in the present. Seeing things in the past, seeing things in the future. Being mindful of how much you can see through closed eyes. Being mindful of the feel of your clothing against your skin and the feel of air all around you touching your exposed skin. And your body against the air that's pushing against you that you can push against. Allowing the sensation of touch begin to move you, as well as the sensations of light and shadow. In a language called English that you're translating into meaning, coming to you from my computer microphone through electricity, through your computer device speakers. From New York to San Francisco,
And now I'm going to turn the floor over to Miguel Gutierrez.
Hi. Hi. I'm Miguel Gutierrez. Oh, did my computer just turn off? Oh, no, there it is. Okay. But the code, hold on. Okay, so, I was like, I can't see. I was like, my glasses. Okay, let me look at you. Hey, thanks for coming to this. Thanks for debates. I broke the internet, but I'm not Kim Kardashian. But am I not Kim Kardashian? Anyway, yeah, I was just like, we were talking about this, I think, and I was just saying how whenever I'm invited to visual art contexts, there's always an artist talk. And whenever I'm invited to dance places, I just have to, like, I'm asked to teach like 50 classes in a day. So I was like, can we like shift it a little bit so we can start to like think about how the teachers are artists and to see like what their practices are. And also how that changes the conversation and the form. And I would just say, like, if I could describe who I am or what I do, and I'm gonna try many different ways today, I feel like that's one of my jobs as an artist, is to like walk into spaces and be like, let's do this differently. Let's think of this in a different way, right? And I don't do it perfectly. There are people who actually probably do it much more gracefully than I do. So my name is Miguel Gutierrez. That's me when I was Mr. Mistopheles in my gymnastics routine thing. Like, I went to this dance school where like my gymnastics class would do like a theme-based number every spring concert. So that year was Cats. So what do? I make stuff. I make dances, performances, music, shitty poems, ranty essays, talks, podcasts, I'm making one podcast, videos, and recently drawings, which is, I never imagined I would be saying that in public, but I've been drawing. So I'm more interested in saying that I do something rather than that I am something, right? Choreographer, writer, musician. I think of myself as a verb, not a noun. I also identify as someone who performs and feels all kinds of ways about what performing is, what it accomplishes, and what it fails at. So I have a very, very tumultuous relationship with the act of performing. And I actually find there's a lot of content in that tumultuousness. And my work creates empathetic and irreverent spaces to feel and talk about things in complicated ways outside of traditional discourse. And I would just ultimately add to that I also just identify as a person who obsessively makes art. Like, I'm kind of obsessed with making stuff. And I do it because I want to stay alive. But I'll talk about that in the next slide. And I use whatever I have available to me. So my work is philosophical inquiry disguised as whatever the fuck it comes out as. It's part of a legacy of experimental forms. Experimental forms have a history. Endurance-based, these are some of the things I'm inspired by. Endurance-based performance art, noise, music, ecstatic experience, mind, body, somatic systems, spectacle, and much more. Each piece I make is about things and is a thing itself. My scope of interest is vast. My father's neurological illness and death, ghostliness, the limits of representation for ethnic or racialized bodies, queer kinship and desire, my profound ambivalence about identity, more on that later. Grief and how to make choreography for the end of the world. Mostly, I make my work to keep myself and others alive, in that order, on this shit raft called life. Also, I like to laugh. Yeah, you know, I would say I also am a Feldenkrais method practitioner. And I'll be seeing clients again starting in the fall. Yeah, I'm someone, like, I don't I do sometimes, very rarely, but I'm not someone who leads with like, I am a queer Latinx, blah, 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 right? Which is, I don't actually know that that actually tells you a lot. If I lead with these identity markers that often are so common in bios, I think it's much more appropriate if I tell you that I'm a 50-something Gen Xer. I'm 50, I'm only 50. That I'm in recovery and then in a lifelong battle with various addictions. That I weigh more than I want to, but I refuse to feel shame about it, even though I do anyway. That I speak many languages, that my dad died in 2019 after an agonizing 10-year illness. That's way more my story than being queer in a way at this point. That I'm in the longest relationship I've ever been in now. That I'm on antidepressants and PrEP. So that gives you some information about me. I think art is a place where solidity, even the solidity of identity, can fall apart or break open. I obviously think that art can help you to recuperate your relationship with what identity even is, assuming you even believe in the concept of self, which I don't always believe in. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, perfect. Can you see that okay? Yeah, I think you can. It's okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm actually gonna start by showing you a bunch of other people's work. In 1996 or 80, I can't remember exactly. Yeah, I think maybe just put on one, that's great. I went to the Whitney Biennial and I was walking around and I walked into this gallery and saw this piece. And it was one of the first times I think I ever saw something where I was like, yes, that is my mind. I felt like I was looking at a map of my mind. And it was this installation by Jason Rhodes, and the piece is called Uno Momento, The Theater in My Dick, A Look to the Physical Ephemeral. And Jason Rhodes very sadly passed away. But just this confluence of all these materials, the way it was laid out, the color, the janky lights, the fact that we could walk around and experience all this multiplicity, which of course is something that many installation artists do now. I'm thinking also most recently of someone who I really love, Colleen Smith's work. But just this kind of relationships, which I see as choreographic. And it was just like, I remember I never had felt that so strongly before. Just like a sense of like, oh, I'm seeing it. And so I've sought out forms that reflect this relationship to complexity that I so desire, both to sort of find myself, I suppose, but also to comment on the world where we live in. So I have a slide next, yeah, thank you, by Cy Twombly, this painting by the great painter Cy Twombly, the first part of the Return from Parnassus. Not in this particular painting, but a lot of his paintings will have text written on them in pencil or you know, and again, it's just such a, I'm obsessed with Cy Twombly's work. I'm obsessed with the amount of space on the canvases. I'm obsessed with just like this furiousness to the stroke, the sort of anger and the heat and the passion that comes across in that. I just love the proposal of saying, this is my painting. And you're like, okay. You know, like there's something so unapologetic to me. The next piece is a piece that it's not a recent piece, but she has a show at the Whitney, Julie Meritu's work, which I also really love. This piece is called Red Opistics, A Renegade Excavation from 2001. And, you know, this, again, I mean, this is in a way much more organized in a traditional sense than the other works. But the layering, the incredible movement that's happening in this work, the force of these blocks of color that take on these geometric forms, the sort of topography that's laid upon what seems like a cityscape behind. So this kind of idea of how we all sort of lay the complexity of who we are onto the given structures that we encounter. I just find it tremendously moving and something I really am drawn to, and I feel like, yeah, well, I have more to say about it. And then this is a recent photograph that I just saw for the first time that I was blown away by Ming Smith, who is the only woman. Oh, I think I lost Mike. Hello. You can hear me online? Can you all hear me? Okay, I'll just keep talking. So Mink Smith was the only woman, as far as I know, she was the only, oh, I think I'm back. Sorry, thank you for that. In the Kamuinga group, which is a collective of Black photographers in the 60s, and she just had her, like, I don't know if it's like her first solo show, but it might have been her first solo show ever at Nicola Vassal Gallery, which is the first Black woman-owned gallery in Chelsea, New York. Woo! It's a beautiful space. It's around the corner from the kitchen. And I was just so blown away by this photograph. All her work is so, so, so beautiful. I so recommend you seeking the work out. This piece is called Acid Rain, Mercy, Mercy Me, Marvin Gaye. And again, just like the kind of what's happening here, is it likely? Is it double exposure? The different sort of, I feel like she has no interest in thinking of photography as a form of verisimilitude. Like, she is not occupied with the idea that photography is meant to represent a thing that exists in reality, and yet she captures, to me, a much more complex idea of reality through this amazing lens that she has. And so there's this poem that I really love by Ariana Reigns called Save the World, and it has this one line that I just love. It's called, "Everything has form. You have form, you asshole. You have form, you fucking asshole." And I really love that line. Because I really believe that everything has form. When I moved to New York in the late 90s, and this still happens, I think it happens less, but people would talk about the word form or formal, and I think they just meant lines. Like, they just meant lines and like unison or things that were legible. And I don't know where it was along my own trajectory as an artist, but I was like, everything has form. Like, I remember just being like, I don't think it's formal only when there's lines or when it becomes recognizable. And someone who I didn't quote here, but who was very inspiring to me, Jack Halberstam's book, The Queer Art of Failure, in the introduction has this line that says, like, illegibility may be the only viable political position left for us, you know, as a form of resistance. Like, the idea of legibility is no longer useful, maybe, to us. And of course, legibility is a really tricky proposition for many subjects who then are regulated by the state, right? Like, you know, trans people, like the way the state is trying to create these stupid, horrible laws, you know, Black voters. Oh wait, you exist? Let's make sure that you can't vote. Like, you know, the way legibility then creates danger for certain subjects, right? So, and there can be a power in not being legible. And I really think about that with dance, because I think dance is actually maybe one of the best places to really think about illegibility, because it inherently is a form that nobody fucking understands. And I see that and have always seen that as one of its greatest strengths, rather than being something that I want to apologize for about it. So I'm going to show you a little excerpts from 3 other people's works that sort of speak to this relationship to form that I've been really occupied with. So the first is an excerpt from Vera Montero. It's a piece called Poetry and Savagery, which is from 1998, and I just really want to like put that out there. It's from 23 years ago, and she's a really amazing artist. So maybe we can just watch. It's just like a minute of each thing. the first two of the three pieces of other people's work. I just love this idea of choreography as a frame for a confluence of disparate behavior. Like this idea that a dance could be a place where people being different together, engaging in things that are not necessarily read as dance, but instead dance becomes our own sort of mode of reading relationships and action. That really came through, and you know, I think it bears mentioning that a lot of like Western European conceptual, they called it conceptual, as if everything isn't conceptual. Dance was in essence a kind of appropriation and retread of a lot of 60s New York postmodernism. And you know, obviously when I look at this, I'm thinking, I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm imagining it looks like a happening or stuff that comes from the early 60s or even later with the Living Theater, those kinds of experimental legacies. Let's go to the next one, which is an excerpt from a piece by Keith Hennessy called Turbulence, a dance about the economy, a piece I really love. So let's just go ahead and just watch it, I guess. I was so struck by the fact that it had no center, that it was a piece that had absolutely no center. And in fact, there's a character in piece or a role in the piece that when I saw it, and I think it maybe was consistent, what Larry Arrington did, the choreographer performer, where Larry like is on the periphery of the audience the whole time and just having conversations with audience members that forcibly turn them away from the action. But they're not aggressive conversations. They're quite gentle, quite personal conversations. I don't know. I was just so moved by this piece, like especially since it's calling itself a dance about the economy. Just this, what that philosophically proposes, a dance that cannot be like identified or reduced or centralized. I just found that it was such a it cracked something open for me. And then the third piece of someone else's work I'll show is a excerpt from one of my very favorite artists in the world, Ralph Lemon. This show, How Can You Stay in the House All Day and Not Go Anywhere? And there's a section in the middle of the piece. It's a 22-ish minute dance section that is just a very, very complicated, very elaborate, nonstop movement. You know, this is almost towards the end of it, so they're quite fatigued. And Ralph says in the first part of the piece that he was interested in trying to make a dance with no form, which, you know, I would take him to task on that idea in a certain way, given my previous slide, but still I understand what he was talking about. So let's just watch this little excerpt. can draw a pretty clear line from you and Fred to this piece aesthetically. Yeah, let's just go on. The next slide is just a dumb picture. That's my headshot from when I was 14. Follow your dreams. Okay. Next one. Okay, I just need, breather. So in 2017, I was commissioned to make a piece for a company called Ballet de Lorraine, a French repertory, contemporary-ish, ballet-ish, not really a ballet company at all, but Peter Jakobson and Tom Cayley are co-directors of the company, and they asked me to make a piece during the 50th anniversary season of the company. The company was formed in 1968, which, if you know, in May 68, it's like a big moment in French culture around protest and explosion, and so it was interesting. And then the other piece on the bill was Rainforest, Merce Cunningham's Rainforest, which is actually one of my favorite Cunningham dances, which is the famous piece with the Mylar, Andy Warhol Mylar balloons. So I kind of quote that as well in here. Yeah, so let's just watch. This is like a couple different things I just stitched together. And the title, Cela nous concerne tous, means this concerns all of us, which was one of the chants from the May 68 protests. And there's so much to tell, but that was actually the second in a series of pieces that I was making where I was exploring certain relationships to abstraction and form. And then I realized before I had left New York in the spring of that year to work on this and this piece, the French piece, and a piece I made in Sweden, I had been working with this group of dancers in New York that were much more racially diverse than Europeans. And that really haunted me because I felt like I had started working towards something, which was also around the time that I wrote an essay called "Does Abstraction Belong to White People?" So then I decided I want to make a piece where I explored some of these ideas, but with an all Latinx cast, to sort of problematize the idea of identity. I feel like the way that sometimes identity is used in for artists of color or minoritarian artists is really limited and limiting. So I wanted to try to make a piece that could explode that open. So I'll show, this will be the longest excerpt. This is a 5-minute excerpt from this show called This Bridge Called My Ass. We can go ahead and show it. It's a bit well, we'll be doing that at Bates next year. Crowd pleaser. Just want to say that Sandra Ibarra, Nibia Pastrana Santiago, Evelyn Sanchez Narvaez, Alvaro Gonzalez, and John Gutierrez, no relation. And just to say, I started with this statement that I have profound ambivalence about identity, and this was a piece where I was trying to understand something about that, but something that my friend Sandra, who's in piece, wrote that really kind of gets at it and talking kind of about form, identity, and possibilities. It's a kind of long quote, but I'm just going to read it to you because it's been very meaningful to me. So we can go to the next slide. It's going to be hard to read there. It'll appear. It's one of those Google slideshow things. Takes a second, I think. Oh, maybe you have to click it again. Oh no, there it is. Ooh. So this is from an essay she wrote called "Identity is a Bureaucratic Nothing Attempting to Be Vital," which was a piece I asked her to write for the Walker Art Center blog. For the curator and many others in the art world, identity must be situated optimistically. Otherwise, the artist is seen as overly negative, self-loathing, and self-hating, como yo. It seems there's an expectation that identity should be some naive celebration meant to work against the onslaught of images of suffering and state violence enacted upon racially identified bodies. Put another way, identity frequently feels like a sad appeal for minoritarian subjecthood, scrubbing or working with meanings and consequences of an externally determined self. It's a bureaucratic nothing trying to be carried out as a vital and recognizable something. It's a biopolitical networking task administered through institutions and assholes with money. It's a model of obedience. It's so old school, it relies on Enlightenment assumptions, the casta system, Christianity, and maps to make sense. It's fucked up, but we participate in this sense-making, in the management of our own difference. We compartmentalize through our bodies, mediums, disciplines, and then our knowledge. If I don't address myself as an object within this network, I am unintelligible. So I drone on about the geographical location of my birth because somehow I think I can alter the horizon of what I am through the geographical site of the US-Mexico border. Creating work about conditions and structures that shape my body is not always helpful for me as an artist. Need a fucking tattoo. The nonprofit art industrial complex and foundation funding want to give racialized artists the big bucks to make legible work about identity, racial injury, and recuperation. The funder is the shepherd, and the artists are the sheep in a state of subordination, confessing and making legible their identities through their work. But I am not interested in making my pain and my body consumable for liberal satisfaction. Thank you. Now we both talk. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you for Zoe on the lights. Oh!
Zoe. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I'm just going to give you this to speak into so that people at home are able to hear. Go to Kat first.
Hi.
That's for the stream.
Oh, okay. I was. Okay. Hi. Thank you to both of you for sharing your work with us. I wanted to ask Miguel about your process. How do you gather the materials? How do you choose what materials you want to put into the work? And about the piece that you made in France, that you said it was choreographed. How do you source the movement? Like, what is the process for that? What's the process?
Sure. So the French piece, I had made a piece in Sweden earlier that year with some students at Doch, a school in Stockholm. So I had sort of identified a process, and even before that, I'd worked in New York with a bunch of dancers, like I said. So I had started thinking through some different ways of working. The first few days in France, I just spent really like leading them through so many improvisations. You know, it was 21 dancers. I never in my life worked with that many people. I was terrified. So I also did a lot of small rehearsals with smaller groups. And I would just do this kind of in live coaching, something that we're hoping to get to this week in the workshop, with them. And I would dance with them and I would guide them through and I would videotape and I would, you know, do that thing of selecting things. And then that particular section, the first part was choreographed. Once they're in the whole theater, that's a big improvisational score called The Situation. But that was very, like, once I kind of inculcated them into this like belief system about movement and multiple directions, we started doing a process where I was like, okay, I got them in this like state. And then I was like, okay, start remembering what you're doing, go. And I would go 2 seconds. I'd say, stop, go back, remember what you did, go. 3 seconds, stop, go back. Like literally built like 3, 4, 5 seconds at a time until we had like 90 seconds of material. It took a long time, it was really hard, but they're such incredible dancers. And I was like if it corrupts, that's perfect. If it doesn't work, that's perfect. Like, please don't make this, you know. And it was hard because they also like, they have a lot of like, moves that they do to really show that they're fancy. And I was like, please don't do that move. You know, don't do the like, everyone does like the flex foot internal attitude to the side, rondage. I'm like, no, that's not contemporary dance. Like, please don't do that. So, and then I applied with bridge. Bridge, the first chunk of bridge is just an improvisational score, a very complex improvisational score. It's too long for me to explain how we got to the language of the score. And then the second half is a telenovela, which is really, really fun. And that was partly about the materials that were in the room when we started rehearsing. We had a Gibney residency, and I noticed that people were playing with like mats and chairs and things. And I was like, okay, I don't want yoga mats in this piece. But then we went to basically we went to House of Spandex and like in the garment district in New York, and we just really meticulously started picking these monochromatic neoprene fabrics. And again, I was like going on instinct. I was like, I don't know why it's this one, it's not that one. It's not the pattern, it's the one that's mesh. You know, it's all these things. And we started bringing that in. And then I just started accumulating to the art stools, the ladder. That was just because I was in a studio we were rehearsing. The extension cords as ropes. We were rehearsing in a studio that had all these like nails in the wall. So we started working with clips. And so we replicated that idea once we got to the space, to the theater space. So it was just kind of building, because I realized that part of the thing about this, there is no such thing as Latinx identity, but there are strange systems of communication that minoritarian identities discover and encounter with each other that they communicate through effectively or directly in mysterious ways. Like, I don't know what it is, but I know what it is when I feel it, right? Like, I know what it is when I see it. I can't put it in a bottle. I can't teach it. But so it was about learning how to create a system of communication together. And it was hard because they really was like, at one point they were like, no, but really, what are we gonna do next? Like, or what's the move? Like, and I was like, I think we have to stay as lost for as long as possible in this idea.
Do I have to press a button? No. Okay. Hi. So since you guys are like teaching together this week, I was just curious about like, do you two have a history of teaching together? Do you have a history of collaborating and making work? And yeah.
Yeah, we've known each other for a really long time. I met Miguel at his going away party when he left the Joe Good Company in San Francisco. I was out for an improvisation festival, and everybody kept saying, oh, there's a party night, a going away party for this guy, Miguel. And I said, oh, free beer? I'm there. And I showed up at his going away party where he was getting a tattoo. And I said, yeah, I gave him my number. He said, when you come to New York, get in touch with me. Blah, blah, blah.
You got me my first job.
Yeah, my friend Jennifer Lacey was looking for a male dancer. She had called me up and said, do you want a male dancer? Obviously not me. And he said, oh, yeah, there's this kid, Miguel, who just moved to New York. I think he's good. I've never seen him. I thought you danced.
I threw a good party.
Yeah. So Jennifer wound up hiring you, and then John Jaspers, and then and you've been in the community. we've done several things. This is the first time we've taught together. Yesterday was the first. It's historic, guys, you who were there, because we've never taught together before. I have been in 2 of Miguel's larger pieces and one improv piece called The Presidents, which we must revive. And we both worked with Yvonne Meyer and her piece Gogolorets. And we co-directed a piece with an incredibly long title that came out in 2016. It's Variations on Themes from Lost and Found and Other Works by John Byrne. No, I totally flubbed the title. It's really too long. It's way too long. It's Variations on Themes from Lost and Found, Scenes from a Life and Other Works by John Byrne, where we took the work of a choreographer, John Byrne, who died of AIDS in 1988. I had danced with, and we watched videotapes of his work, read his journals, and did a sort of a fantasia of what his piece might have become had he lived on. So yeah, that's sort of our history in working together. Anything else?
Ish is one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh. Why?
Because you crazy girl.
Anything else? Yeah. I'll throw that to you.
The cat show.
Hello, welcome back to the Cat Show.
Welcome back.
One question for Ishmael. I think it's great to be in the presence of someone that has been, in the dance world for so long, making work. And it was great to see that video in that space, because I've been in that space. I live in New York City. And I was wondering, how do you feel, this is kind of a big question, but how do you feel the downtown scene has changed from when you began dancing there to now? Because you talked about it being a very white space, and I feel like it is still a very white space. And kind of how have things changed? How have things stayed the same?
It's changed in a lot of ways. The downtown scene that was around the East Village when I moved to New York in 1980 has decentralized a lot, which is actually good and bad. It's good. It was good because we all lived within blocks of each other and blocks of the spaces where we performed and saw things and went to diners and bars afterwards. And there was like a real sense of like physical community, which also was very insular and didn't let a lot of other influences of different people with different demographics in. As rents have skyrocketed in the East Village, where I still live, but I'm the old man who lives in the East Village. It's like, get off my lawn. I think the decentralization of people being forced out by economics and real estate was actually a kind of a positive thing, that people have decentralized a one place, a one neighborhood, and more, I think, even though it's still very much a white space in the experimental dance world, I think the institutions that I deal with, Movement Research, Danspace Project, Performance Space New York, formerly PS 122, are aware of their limitations, aware that they were defining experimentation in a very narrow sense, sort of a pre-Judson Church sense, that there was a lineage there, and that the lineage is actually much broader than that. And I think there is an awareness of that, but it's a slow process. I was on the board of Danspace Project, and I'm on the board of Movement Research. And when we were going through sort of a strategic planning process several years ago, and we were like trying to rewrite our mission, and the mission said something about how we saw experimentation, and rather than deepening the experimentation of dance, we wanted to broaden it. Rather than going so much deeper, actually getting wider field, finding people from different forms. Because experimentation doesn't exist in one lineage. It never has and never will. But there was sort of a mindset, I think, in the downtown scene from the 80s and 90s that there was this lineage from Yvonne Rainer, Trisha Brown, David Gordon to now, But, I'm skipping several generations in between. And I think it's better I think it's promising. I think people who administer those spaces are really conscious that I think Legacy Russell being named at the kitchen is really an important step up for that.
This is, oh, okay. This is probably like a very random question, but what is your favorite part about your process, both of you? Like, what is like that part that you enjoy the most?
Well, for me, I think both in my choreographic work, I also quibble that there isn't a dichotomy between choreography and improvisation. I think it's all choreography. It's just set choreography or improvised choreography. But also in my choreography, in my writing, and in my curating, not knowing, going into the unknown, diving into the unknown, being aware that when I curated things, it's like curating platforms with impossible questions that I don't know the answers to and probably will never find out the exact question, their exact answer to those questions. When I go into making a dance process, it was like, I like not knowing. I don't want to know too much. Yeah, I think that is the favorite. I mean, I think that's actually an honest answer. Woo. You?
It's like two things. One is I really love being in a room with people that I've chosen that want to be there with me, and that I don't have to like. I mean, it's not like I don't have to deal with being. I don't know how I want to say it. There's a sociality in this form that I really enjoy. And I like gathering people around a set of questions and concerns. That just is really inspiring to me. And I always choose people, because I work project to project, I always choose people that I'm in awe of in some way, who can do something that I can't. With Bridge, I was like one of the first times I was in a rehearsal process where I was like, these people are crazier than me. Like I have to be like, Sandra, please do not break the ladder again. Like it was like such an amazing, I loved that. It was so liberating that the wildness was finally coming from without, and it was teaching me something. Because even though I'm weird, whatever, I'm also very tight in many, many, many ways. I'm very like Virgo rising in many ways. And then the other thing I would say that I enjoy the most is when I call it like the eros, but it's like ideas like consume me, and then I get so like compelled to realize them that like it's like literally nothing will stop me. Like I will see this thing through to the very end, and it's just like there's like this. I'm like, I need to get this. Okay, great. Okay, I have to stay up for 14 hours straight to make this music score. Great. Okay, I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna, like there's this thing that just like I feel like I'm being carried by something that's not even me. Which many people talk about the spiritual in relationship to art making. I think it's that. I think it's also addiction. It's like, it's also problematic as fuck sometimes because I get really like narrow, and then it's like nothing else. I don't care about anything else, which is a problem. But I also love that feeling. I love feeling excited, so excited about something that I want to make sure it happens.
One more.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I had a question for Ishmael, but for both of you, I guess, too. And I was wondering, like, how do you navigate the line between creating art for yourself or for your enjoyment and for the audience?
I think if I answer truthfully, I think I only make work that I would really want to see. I think when I'm in the process of making work, I'm thinking, would I want to sit, for 60 to 90 minutes watching this? I mean, it seems very narcissistic maybe, but it's like I make work that I want, that I feel a need to make. So yeah, it's never superficial. I mean, I guess there are times when I've been, in teaching situations at universities, says, oh, here are a bunch of students, make a piece. And the sort of like, oh God, the transparency here. There's this one piece that I think I keep making when I am asked to make pieces with students, and I keep changing the music and changing the title, but it's basically the same piece. Like, I really realize that. So with that exception, with those pieces accepted, when I'm making pieces like for myself, they're made, okay, what I want to sit through, what I want to sit with this piece, what I want to live in this piece. And also what I want to live for a few months making the piece with these people. Like, that's also something that I consider. I think casting is really a big thing too. So yeah, keep thinking. I'm gonna answer.
Can you say the question again? Just.
Yeah, how do you navigate the line between making a piece for yourself versus making it for the other?
I mean, I guess I have a kind of woo-woo answer to that, which is like, I really feel like when I'm making something, I'm just listening to the piece. Like, my role is to serve the piece. And yes, my interests, but I've made pieces that I was horrified by certain sections of sometimes. Like, it's not always about liking it. I also feel like not liking it, but would you be wanted? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put that word in your mouth. I mean, also there's so many biorhythms as a maker. There's the part of the project where you're like, I'm a genius. And then there's the part of the project where you're like, I am the stupidest person. That's usually like dress rehearsal. It's like, I can't believe anyone is gonna have to look at this. I'm humiliated. So it's also like, it's dangerous to get too caught up in these questions of the other and the thing, or you invite a friend to rehearsal, like, did you like it? Like, death. That's not useful. You have to choose your critics wisely while you're working and while you're making something. And it's not always about, it's I mean, I believe in pleasure, believe me, I really do. But I'm really like, kind of what Ish was saying about the not knowing, like, what is this thing? I'm like, if I truly am an experimental artist, right? Like, what the hell is an experimental artist who isn't one in a certain way? Well, I do think there's a difference. I think the experimental artist contends with this thing of like, I'm gonna really commit to like not knowing what's gonna happen here. I'm not gonna just plug into a preordained form. We can have arguments about whether or not that's really true, given that the contexts are the same often. But it's about living with that question, and then about like, well, what is it? And this thing of like, it's always for someone. I always feel like my work is for the person who wants to receive it, but I don't actually know who that looks like all the time, and the person who I think that might not be the person. And that's also been something I've learned a lot in my career, where it's like this idea that I can know what the response is going to be, or, I mean, I was really psyched, of course, when like brown folks saw a bridge and were like, yay, but I don't think every Latinx person who saw that piece was into it. I don't imagine they would be. And it's not, what I'm saying? So it's like this thing.
Something just came up when you were talking, and when I quibbled with the word like. So in the piece, the second video I showed you, and I said it had really bad responses in the 80s when it premiered. And part of that was that I had this vision that friends of mine, lovers of mine were dying, literally dying in their 20s and 30s. And I was afraid of death. I was afraid of the death around me. So I had this vision that I really wanted to wrestle a dead thing, an animal, a carcass. And it terrified me. I can't change mousetraps. Dead things freak me out. But there's a section in that piece, it's like a minute long toward the end, where in the 80s it was me, in the 2010 version it was someone else, thank God, that wrestles a goat carcass. We found the carcass of a goat, and on that mattress that gets brought out, there's this section. And it was very cathartic. I mean, it was something that I needed to do, and audiences hated it. Many people in the audiences then hated it. But I needed to do it for myself, to sort of exercise my fear of death, and just really, sticking my head into the cavity of a dead goat was actually very necessary. And it wasn't made for an audience, but I knew I was going to do it in front of people, so I don't know where that line is. And on that happy note.
And scene.
Thank you both so much. Upcoming, Miguel has a podcast. The first episode will drop August 9th called Are You For Sale? So look for that. And then the last video that Ishmael showed, Try, the project he's currently working on, will premiere in San Francisco in November at Zspace. So keep your eyes open. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those of you at home. Have a good night.